Hey everybody, welcome back to Gideon Stuff. You ready to buckle up? Because this is probably going to be a pretty long video, but we have, finally, my full review of the Cold Steel Engage. Yeah, there's a lot to get into here, so we're just going to go ahead and get right into it. This is a knife that I carried and used a lot this summer while I was working in the woods, and now that I'm back at college and I'm just doing boring city stuff, I finally have time to sit down and review this knife. I feel like I used it and abused it enough, so let's go ahead and get our blade length measurement out of the way. As you can see here, we're coming in exactly at 3.5 inches. Sharpened edge is a little shorter, about 3.25, but yeah, definitely a full-size knife, as you might expect from Cold Steel. Let's get our size comparisons out here. Rat 1 and the 2. So, full-size knife, definitely a tall, broad knife, but the Rat 1 is a tad longer. Kind of hard to see because this knife, again, it's much broader, but the Rat 1 is just a smidge longer. Go ahead and get out these ones. There's the bug out. And there's our PM2. Get them lined up pivot to pivot. Let's go ahead and bring out our Civivis, just because. There's our Elementum. And our Praxis. Again, this knife isn't all that much broader than the Praxis. But get out here, Elementum. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so it's not that much broader than the Elementum or than the Praxis. The Praxis is definitely longer, but this knife just has more presence, if that makes sense. And let's compare against a couple of Cold Steels. Let's compare it against first. There's the 8010. And here's the 8015. Whew! Geez, we've got a lot on the screen right now. There's a lot of knife on the screen right now. So, there we go. Alrighty, so what are we looking at in terms of materials? Whoops, bumped the camera, Gideon. So we have a clip point S35 VN blade, which is labeled right there. Beautiful finish. We have G10 scales, G10 pocket clip. There are steel liners in there, and the lock is Cold Steel's Atlas lock, which actually, let's bring out another couple of size comparisons just because I know everyone's going to want to see these. How could I have been so silly as to not bring out the Demcos? There it is with the shark's foot. Adjust your camera a little bit here, Gideon, bud. So yeah, obviously this Atlas lock is kind of a response to the Demco Shark lock. As we brought out earlier, we brought out the 8010, the 8015. The 8010, of course, having Demco's Triad lock, which is a staple for Cold Steel, and then the 8015 having Demco's Scorpion lock. Demco no longer works with Cold Steel, I believe. He left when Lynn Thompson sold the company. And so, had that not happened, we probably would have seen the Cold Steel make eventually a Demco 8020. We may not have even seen the 20.5. Demco might have just done their version of the full-size 8020. Or Cold Steel would have done a full-size version of the Demco 8020. However, again, company got sold, Demco left, and so Cold Steel, to just kind of, I guess, keep up appearances, or just to kind of compete. Whew, big loud truck just went by. They came up with this. It is different than the shark lock. I will show pictures of it disassembled later on, but yeah, that's kind of where it came from. We'll talk about what I think about that lock here in a little bit, but yeah, I've got a lot to say about this knife, so we're not going to procrastinate anymore. Let's get right into it. All right, guys, let's talk about the Cold Steel Engage. This is Cold Steel's. It's kind of their new big thing for this year. New lock, and this is kind of their flagship model with that new lock. I have been carrying this knife pretty much exclusively at work since I got it, and the work season is now over as of yesterday. But I used this knife. I used it hard. What do I think? Well, I've got a lot of thoughts about it, as you might expect, because I usually have a lot of thoughts. But for those of you who don't know, I'm spluttering. Like the Brook is babbling. I am stuttering and spluttering and blah, blah, blah. I can't speak English. So, for those of you who don't know, during the summers I work on a ranch. There's some confusion. Yes, my family owns a cattle ranch, but during the summers I do come back to my hometown and I visit with my family a lot and I work on that ranch a lot. But my paying job is actually at another ranch that's owned by different people, some wealthy people. So while I'm out there, what am I doing? You know, doing a little bit of cowboying, doing fence work, irrigating ditches, construction, maintenance, things like that. And so I really do a lot of times have call for a heavy-duty folder. There's a lot of different things I put my pocket knife through at work, and I tried to put this knife through all those different things. So, this is a big knife, but it's not an XL knife, and I really appreciate that. The blade length is 3.5 inches, which is a great size. It's not overly fat, which is awesome, but it's definitely overbuilt and robust. I mean, with the lock, pretty thick, substantial blade stock, and you know, there's a saying that I've heard from Cold Steel. I think it was Lynn Thompson or what's that other guy? Like there's the throwing knives named after him, La Fontaine or something. I'm not sure. Probably butchered that. But the saying was, a big knife can do everything a small knife can, but a small knife cannot do everything a big knife can. And that's true. And this knife, for me, felt like it was trying to hit kind of a happy medium where it's a large, overbuilt knife, but not too large. And, you know, people debate all the time, you know, well, small knives are better, big knives are better. No, you don't need an overbuilt pocket knife, yada, yada, yada. And there's good points made on both sides. For me, I do appreciate overbuilt knives. And when you're talking about big knives being able to do everything a small knife can, but not vice versa, it doesn't mean a big knife can do everything a small knife can as good as a small knife. But for example, I use this for a lot of wood work at my job. Something I do a lot is I make wooden stakes. We drive them into the ground to hold irrigation tarps in place. I drive them into the ground at the bottom of stays. I cut lots of thick rope. I've cut pallet straps, plastics, all kinds of things that a big knife is good at. I even chop with this knife several times, especially for making those stays. I'll find a piece of wood and then I'll chop it down to the size I need so I can whittle it down to the stay. And so, yeah, it does big knife jobs really, really well. A small knife cannot chop. You know, if I had a Civivi Elementum and this knife, I mean, it's not like a competition chopper, but it can do the job because it's big enough. Civivi Elementum can't. Then, I also use this knife for example, I gutted a bunch of fish with it. That's kind of a small knife job. This knife handled it well. Now, if I'd had this knife versus the VV Elementum, the Elementum might have done slightly better in cleaning out those fish. It probably would have been a little more efficient, maybe a little easier to handle, but this knife could still do it. And so that's something that I think Cold Steel tries to hit a lot with their larger knives, is big knife, you know, capability, but, you know, if you have an Espada XL in your pocket, you'll be able to lop someone's head off, and then you'll also be able to open an Amazon package. It's gonna be a little bit weird to have your big two-handed sword, you know, opening an Amazon package, but you can technically do it. So, yes. What do I think about the Atlas lock? I like it. It's obviously meant to kind of compete with the Shark lock, and I don't think it is better than the Shark lock, but I also don't think it's worse. A lot of people talked about how far back the engagement is, and for me, it took me no time at all to adjust to that. Like the first day I had this, I adjusted to the manipulation. It's very easy to do, so good on that. There is no detent, so that could be a pro or a con for you. It is a front flipper, you know, that's good. But we will talk about more of that stuff when I'm doing the review cutting. For now, I actually wanted to go ahead and do some borderline ridiculous stuff for demonstration purposes. So, let's do it! Alright, forget knife testing for a second. I think I found something more interesting. All these rocks laying here, these could be from a natural landslide a long time ago, but I think this looks more like mine tailings or something else human-made. Oh my gosh. What is that? Oh geez. That's natural. Oh wow. Up we go. Whoa. Slippery. Back down we go. Let's see what's back here. Alright, so I guess it is all just natural erosion. I'm an idiot. That's okay. Let's get up top. Mamas, don't let your kids grow up to be geologists. Huh. Just another pretty little plateau up here. Actually, it looks like there's an old logging road over here. Let's go check that out. Yep. It's an old logging road. You know what? I think we'll do our knife testing up here. Only bad part is I left the stand down there, so I'm going to have to run and grab that. Okay, I found some cool stuff. Look at this. Whoops, get in this frame, Gideon. So I think this is some kind of amorphic hydrous quartz, like a... Focus in there. Like a mogonite or chalcedony. But yeah, I'm really not sure. It's gorgeous, whatever it is. You see, when crystals form in this bumpy pattern, we call that botryoidal crystal habit. Okay, we better get on with knife testing. Guys, I'm serious. Being a geologist it's hard. I'm going to have to haul all these rocks, plus any more that I find, off this mountain. My back is going to kill me. But, you know what? And I think I'm actually going to explore this abandoned road a little bit. This is really interesting. But first, knife testing. Because I ain't no quitter. So, I think I should preface all this by saying, you know, don't try this at home unless you want to. I am a trained professional. Of course, that's a lie. I'm basically just an idiot with a knife. And that's pretty terrifying. But let's go ahead and test this lock strength. So, I do have just a tiny bit of rattle. Blade play in here. We'll see what happens. Let's go ahead and... You know what? This isn't completely straight, but that's okay. No one really is. I'm not sure how well you guys can see this. You know what? Let's get you guys closer to the action. That's what you want, right? Yeah, of course. See if I can find me a better batoner. Better baton. You know what? We'll just do some chopping first. Edge looks beautiful. Not any more wiggle than we had when we started. Whew. I really hope that was all in frame. Should have checked before I started. Okay, I gotta show you this. Look at how well this thing bites into wood. And this is just pine, so it's not, you know, a hardwood, but the profile this knife has, if I can keep it in the screen, allows you to get some really deep, powerful cuts in through that wood. Yeah, keeping this in screen is the tricky part. Let's see if we can just... Alright, now we have a impromptu baton. Let's get you guys even closer to the action. Okay. Still as solid as when we started. You know what? Screw it. I paid $600. Well, I paid $165 for this thing. My broke college ass is gonna hate this. Well, still works great. Except for the pocket clip. I don't like the pocket clip at all. I'm gonna go down that old road now. Look at all these rocks I found. Found some pretty good stuff. Here's a chunk of quartz, which is the white, and that pink there. It's probably a mineral called orthoclase, which, say it with me, is a potassium feldspar. We've talked about those a lot on this channel. Funny story, I followed that little mine road, and it came out kind of close to a forest road. So on the side of the hill looking at some rocks, and you know, I'm bent over. My butt is towards the road, and I'm bent over. I'm looking at rocks, and some people drive by, and they wolf whistle. And I'll tell you what, I have never felt so damn beautiful. Gosh, it changed my life. Actually, I probably should have run them down and sued them for sexual harassment. I probably could have made some money off of that. I mean, because out here, this is my workplace, so, you know, technically workplace harassment. Anyways, I kept finding more of this stuff. I hope that is focusing. In these little thin sheets, and I'll be honest, I have no idea what it is. I'm assuming it's botryoidal quartz. Just because this area has lots of igneous metamorphic rocks, and quartz is, you know, highly associated with those types of rocks. And also, quartz is just one of the most common minerals out there. Its chemical formula is SiO2, so you have two oxygens bonded to a silica. And silica and oxygen are some of the most commonly occurring elements on this planet. So quartz forms very easily. It's all over the place. I don't know, this stuff is just really weird. Look at that cross section, if you can even see that. I found a bigger chunk. There it is. And in cross section, you can see it has those bubbles. It's got kind of this translucent but milky look to it. Really cool stuff. You know what? Let's test the hardness. So quartz has a hardness similar to glass, which is about 7 to 7.5 on the Rockwell scale. Interesting. So steel, I've been told that steel has a hardness of 4 to 5. And that is definitely true of things like Victorinoxes and stuff. But I found that good, you know, this is S35VN, steels like that often score more like a 6 in the hardness department. But okay, so this is definitely softer than quartz usually is, so it might be that there's inclusions in this quartz that make it not quite so pure. Maybe it's not even quartz. This could be like chalcedony, which is basically quartz, but yeah, kind of different. Anyways, enough about rocks. So we do have a little bit of rolling on this edge here, but otherwise held up great. Still sharp. Action is good. Centering is good. Let's go ahead and do the regular cutting stuff. Alrighty, let's talk about the cold steel engage. Like we haven't already been talking about it, right? Let's go ahead and start off with the ergonomics. I think they're good. They are very solid ergonomics. If you watched my initial impressions video for this knife, I talked a little bit about that, but You know, you have this choil here that you can choke up into. This area on top of the spine here is excellent for getting your thumb in, especially when you're choked up. You can do a lot of work like this. Back here, also very comfortable. That pocket clip is the most uncomfortable aspect of the handle because it's a deep carry clip. Deep carry clips are always, you know, hot spots. They just are in a lot of cases. And, you know, it's no different here. We'll get back to that pocket clip, but yeah, it does cause some issues. The knife itself is thin compared to other cold steels, but it's not, I mean, it's still girthy, it's still hand-filling. And actually, just a second. Grab a glove. The hotspot issue can be fixed with a glove. With gloves, there's no hot spots on this knife at all, but it still works very good. With gloves, you need to make sure that you have good indexing because gloves take away a lot of your tactile sensory vibes. That was stupid. This knife is easy to work with gloves, and this big guard here really helps to index this knife when you're using gloves. Whether you're choked up and you get it between these two fingers or you're back here, very good. The knife is substantial enough that you can, you know, still feel it through your gloves. So that's really, really nice. Let's talk about the action. This is running on washers. I appreciate the heck out of that. For a hard use knife, bearings just introduce unnecessary problems. Now, bearings aren't just immediately going to, you know, make your knife fail if you're using it in a dirty environment. But, you know, over time, they can get wore out pretty quick. And so I like seeing that this is on washers, and the action, whoops, is still very good. You can reverse flick it. It'll, you know, it's very fidgety, super fidgety, really fun. We already talked, but no detent. So, you know, if that's your mode of fidgeting, good for you. And it's a front flipper right there, so hooray. Let's talk about the carry. Let's go ahead and get a little lower, more intimate. Wow, I'm not even sure what I said there, but okay, so pretty thin knife for a cold steel. It's really tall. That's going to bother a lot of people. There's what it looks like in the pocket, and it actually rides pretty good. You can get your hand in there and, you know, do stuff. I hate the pocket clip. Especially when I was working, you know, wearing gloves. Look how much clearance you have under that clip. Like right here, there's no clearance. I have to literally pinch the pocket clip and put it into my pants like that. No way, no. It is reversible. That's good. You know, some lefty love makes this a fully ambi knife. But, yeah, that's an issue for me. Okay, let's go ahead and do some cutting. So we have our thick double wall cardboard. So I didn't get a behind the edge thickness on this guy. It's probably 25 to 30 thousandths, but the cutting geometry is good. It does cut. Just because it's thick behind the edge doesn't mean it won't cut good. This knife cuts good. Let's get some rope. There we go. Just a second. I need to grab my piece of wood. Back with our man-sized cutting board. Just a second. Make sure this is recording. It is. Good job. I'm an idiot. Okay, man-sized cutting board. Where's that piece of rope I cut off? Where did I put it? There it is. Let's do the push through. Really good spot for my finger right here. Yep. Yeah. Absolutely amazing at the push through. Knives that are a little bit thicker, they crunch through the rope really, really well. All right, let's see how the geometry is done. See how the grinds are. Okay, you can definitely tell it was thick. Let's try to go a little thinner. It did that absolutely fine, no problem. We're only going to do two because we're almost out of Mr. Pool Noodle. We've almost used him up. You know, something I'm really starting to realize the more I run this channel and the more I test knives. Let's tilt up for my face. I don't want to look at my crotch. The more I test knives, the more I handle, the more apparent it becomes to me that behind the edge thickness doesn't really mean anything. Or, I mean, it does mean something, but it's not the end-all be-all. And I know those are probably fighting words for some people, and I used to be someone who was absolutely obsessed with behind the edge readings. But in a lot of ways, if you get your knife very thin behind the edge, you can kind of cheat on how well your sharpening or your grinding is done. Because if it's very, very thin, it'll cut, even if it's semi-dull or the grinds are uneven, right? Of course, if you have a knife that's super thin behind the edge with super clean grinds and super precise sharpening, it will cut very well. It will cut amazingly well. But something else I've learned is the geometry is what matters most, and not the thinness of the geometry. But take this cold sealing gauge, pretty thick behind the edge, but it went through that pool noodle really well. Not as well as, like, you know, not like a scalpel, right? But it went through well, and I could feel as I was going through it that it was sharp, that the grind was even, and you know, the pool noodle didn't bind up. It didn't wiggle and do a weird cut. It went through very, very well. And so yeah, and some of my favorite knives in the world, as far as slicing performance goes, like cardboard destroyers, it's not the thinness behind the edge, it's the thinness of the spine or the shape of the blade that does the most damage, right? So with this knife here, and especially flat grind, so this is a saber grind here. Flat grinds behind the edge readings don't really mean that much because, I mean, you're getting thicker consistently all the way up to the top. With hollow grinds, you know, thickness behind the edge is more of a marketable feature, I guess, because, you know, they stay thin through more sharpenings. But even then, a lot of people, you lay back your edge to 17 degrees and you've increased the thickness behind the edge in most cases because you've increased the edge. So I guess I mean, this is kind of off topic from the whole review, but what I'm saying is, do not let behind the edge thickness be the end all be all. You guys have seen on this channel, I've had several knives that were very thin behind the edge that didn't go through the pool noodle super well because the grind was a little bit uneven or the sharpening from the factory wasn't all that great. So there we go. Another thing I want to talk about, I haven't sharpened this knife yet. I've been using it for weeks at work. I beat it through some trees up there, did this stuff. There's a little tiny roll in the edge right here. The knife gods are displeased that I damaged their tough boy. Raining east somewhere. But, that's it. And it is still very sharp. In fact, do I have any paper? I ought to have paper around here. Just a second. I have an Arby's receipt in my truck. So I haven't touched up this edge, haven't done anything with it. The wind is blowing, so this is going to make this a little interesting. It's not as sharp as it was out of the box, but gosh dang it, for all the use I've put that through, that is really dang sharp. So, I love S35 yen, especially Cold Steel's S35 yen. It just takes so much abuse, and, you know, it lives to cut another day. Uh-oh. I was gonna make a point about something, but I have just lost that knife in the grass. So, un momento, por favor. So remember what I said earlier about me being an idiot with a knife? I was almost an idiot without a knife, but I found it. Let's see how it held up. Absolutely fine. All right, let's go ahead. Let's go get the rest of this review done. And you know what? I know you guys all like this, so there we go. There's the cold steel Engage. Let's go get this review done. Okay, that was a lot. I know. There was a lot to get into there. But one of the reasons I like reviewing cold steel so much is because I feel like I have a really great platform to review them on. I feel like my summer job as a ranch hand for a large ranch is kind of their target audience, right? And so whenever I review a cold steel, I really want to put it through its paces. So that's something I want to talk about real quick. In the videos that you guys just saw with me beating on the lock and stuff, you know, that was done just for, you know, basically for entertainment purposes, but also, you know, just to see, you know, what can the lock suffer. In actual use, how did I, you know, test the lock in kind of real world environments? I use this knife in a lot of pretty brutal ways. Something that is a great test of a lock is how well the knife can handle different stresses, different flexes and pressures and tensions on the blade. So one thing I did with this knife at work was I actually used it to pry apart pallet strap, or not pallet straps, the pallets themselves. So, you know, you take down a pallet, you get all the whatever was on that pallet, feed sacks or fencing materials or something like that. And then sometimes you can use that wood for other things. So I pried apart a couple of pallets. That's pretty strenuous on a lock. This type of motion here, and especially, you know, you jam it in between these two pieces of wood, and you're popping up, you're popping that way, you're wiggling around. Yeah, the lock held up pretty good for me in terms of, you know, that type of usage. I did chopping with it. I do a lot of woodwork with my job. I'm out in the forest. There's lots of wood, and, you know, we use it for stuff. And so I did a lot of woodwork with this. I batoned with it a couple times. Not too often because, you know, this isn't a very long blade. But for example, one thing I did was if I was making a stave to put in in the fence, I remember on several occasions, you know, I found these young pine or spruce trees that had died. And so nice long poles, you know, about that diameter is what I like for the stays. But in some cases, they're 12 feet long, 15. And so, you know, and obviously, too, they go from this big around and then they get narrower. And so I put the knife down, grab another piece of wood, baton it through to cut the tree into different sections where I could, you know, then take a section that was to my required length and diameter, whittle it down a little bit, and slap it in the fence. So I just want to you know, say that right now, that the you know, bashing it with wood and stuff for camera, I did that, yes, to test the lock, but also for entertainment purposes. And I did test the lock in real world environments too. But I'm at work when I do that stuff, so it's not really that easy to film because, you know, you try and take out a camera at your job and just, you know, you're being paid to be there. Do what you need to do. Okay, all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into what I like and don't like about the cold steel Engage. First thing I like, the materials to price. I usually talk about price at the end, but we're going to talk about price right now. So G10, S35VN, this new lock, all this comes in at $165. I actually think that's a great deal. I think that's a really, really good deal, especially when you know, the Cold Steel 8010. I see these going for like $190, $200 most places. Although, here's a little tip. If you want to buy a Cold Steel knife, buy them on Amazon. When I bought my 8010, I found on Amazon for $109. So, tuck that little bit of information away somewhere. Maybe when these eventually come out on Amazon, I don't think I've seen them on Amazon yet, but when they get there, they might be pretty cheap. They might be, you know, even more affordable than $165. But even at $165, which is what I paid for this, yeah, I think you're definitely getting your money's worth, and that's awesome. I think that's really, really cool. Okay, next thing, I like the materials. G10, I like G10. It's good. But S35VN, that's a fantastic blade steel. I know a lot of people are kind of starting to complain about S35VN. You know, it's not the most premium anymore. It's turning into a budget steel. But here's the thing. It's still a good steel. Like, it's a fantastic steel. It's nice and stainless. Like, I'll be honest, I don't have that much problem with S35VN and rust. And I use my cold steels, geez, in irrigation ditches, in the rain, in the snow, in the mud. Like, they get wet. And, you know, when I'm on the job, my knife gets wet, I wipe it off on my pants and then throw it in the grass. Or, you know, when the job is done, wipe it off on my pants, put it in my pocket, and go on to the next task. And then that evening, when I get back from work, you know, clean up my knife, make sure everything's still in shape, and I've never had really any rust problems. So S35VN, great stainless steel. The other thing, too, is it's decently tough. Again, it's a stainless steel, so it's not going to be as tough as, like, your carbon steels, but it's still nice and tough, especially compared to things like M390. And on a knife like this that's meant to take some abuse or, you know, handle impacts, I think that's really, really important. You don't want your knife chipping, because a chip in the field is pretty hard to deal with, right? If Cold Steel started making knives like this in like 20 CV to appeal to the, you know, more premium feeling, I would stop buying them, because 20 CV is a pain in the butt to fix up in the field. Again, these are knives that I'm using hard. They're getting abused, and, you know, I'm out in the woods. I'm 50 miles away from civilization. And so, you know, something goes wrong with my edge, I need to be able to fix it right then and there. And so that's why I carry one of these bad boys with me to work all the time, because that's what I do my edge repair on. And so the great thing about S35VN is, instead of chipping, it will most likely roll. In fact, I think I've got a roll on this edge right now that I haven't fixed yet. Little bit of damage there. You see that? And then there's some more. Let's see here. So yeah, you can see right there. There's some, and if we go along the edge, get off there, you little speck of gunk. Get that in a second. Yeah, so S35VN is just easier to touch up in the field. If I do chip my S35VN, again, it's going to be a little bit easier to touch up than 20CV. I can get back to work, right? So I appreciate the use of S35VN. The G10 is really, really good. Let's go ahead and talk about the handle. So when I first saw pictures of this knife, I thought that this area here looked goofy. Like, I was like, wow, that's a pretty big finger guard. That looks goofy and annoying. I mean, it allows your knife to stand up like a, kind of looks like a pig. But, you know, I thought that just looked kind of big and goofy. However, when I started actually using the knife out in the woods, you know, I'm wearing thick, heavy gloves, I realized, oh, this makes it so easy to know exactly where the knife is when I grab it. Without paying attention, and then I can choke up here. And even when I'm wearing thick, heavy gloves, it works. And, when you're wearing gloves, it removes a lot of your dexterity. And sometimes you can't feel things out as good as you can when you just have, your little fingers. For example, there's been times using my Spyderco PM2 where I'll pull it out of my pocket, I've got my gloves on, and then you slow roll it open, and I've grabbed it, and it's like, oh no, and of course I'm wearing gloves, so it doesn't really matter if I grab it like this, but, it's just a little bit uncomfortable, reposition myself and go to work. With this knife, pull it out of my pocket, flick it open, go to grab it, it's like, oh, there's that big thing, bam, puts my hand right where I need it, make a big solid cut. So yeah, really appreciate that. Again, it also serves as a guard to keep you from moving up on a blade, especially if you're doing puncturing, if you're doing, when you have a piece of wood and you're really bearing down on it, like you're trying to get a knot out, and you're going down on it like this, and you're cutting in, you're digging in. If your knife suddenly slips, yeah, you want some protection there. So I appreciate that. The ergonomics of this knife overall are pretty good. These grooves here, I thought they were just for decoration at first, but I discovered, again, while wearing gloves, that actually gave me a little bit of texture. Because again, when you have gloves on, you can't feel things as good as you normally can. And so with those little ridges there, like my fingers grabbed in there, and I felt like I had some control over the knife. Really, really good. This area up here is excellent. Get in there, do stuff like this if you're like doing a skinning task or something. Get up in here, put your thumb there for your push cuts. Just really, really great. Get back here and you still get some more leverage on there. Yeah, really nice little design feature there, the Poon Spoon. I like it. The scales, the knife itself is not all that thick. It's still thick compared to a lot of knives, but if we compare it here to the 8010, you see it's pretty slim by cold steel standards. And that actually helps it feel good in the pocket, but you can see how tall it is, and that offsets the narrowness in the hand. And again, it's not super narrow, but overall it just feels very well balanced in your hand. Slightly contoured, which I think is really, really nice. I was worried that barehanded, I'd feel this little dip here, and I really don't. I really don't. When I'm barehanded, I'm using this knife, I really don't feel like that's digging in at all. I squeeze hard. And you can see the pocket clip makes quite a mark, but that area there, squeeze! Not really. It doesn't really hurt that bad, or at all. It doesn't hurt at all. So that's good. I like that. The ergonomics on this knife, overall, I think are very, very solid. There's one caveat, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but I think the ergonomics on this knife are pretty solid. And that's important, right? I think Cold Steel's very good at ergonomics, and especially when they had, Andrew Demko there. He's a master of ergonomics. Like, this is a very comfortable knife. But Cold Steel really does have their ergonomics down. They know how to make a knife that will fit your hand. And you can see here, this knife, I wouldn't call it an Ergos neutral because, you've got like this spike back here. But I think it'll fit most people's hands. I really do. And it's very comfortable. And that's important for a work knife. If you're going to be using your knife for hard tasks for extended periods of time, it needs to be something that you can actually hold on to for a long time. If it's going to wear your hand out, if it's going to hurt your hand, if it's going to cause you to have an insecure grip, then it's no good as a work knife. Then it's just a hindrance. It's a hazard, and you should probably get something else. This knife, I am pleased to say, does not have those issues. It's very, very comfortable, and that's very, very good. Alrighty. And I guess here's what I'm going to say with the ergonomics real quick. Because like it kind of, I'm talking about, a work knife needs to have good ergonomics. Like it needs to, that is a requirement. It's like, well, doesn't every knife? And no, geez, I'm going to go off on a lot of tangents on this video. So this is CGRB Mylea. And this knife has good ergonomics. Like this knife has good ergonomics. I can get right there. Even back here, it's okay. But these are not ergonomics that I would like to use for a long time under heavy conditions. For just small, simple cuts, EDC tasks, they work just fine. You know, they work absolutely fine, and that's fine. Jeez. Sometimes I think I have the vocabulary of like someone who's just starting to learn English. But anyways, on a work knife, a knife that you're supposed to use for long periods of time, very hard, good ergonomics is a must. Okay, this is taking too long. Let's go ahead and go through some smaller things real quick. We already talked about the blade, but one thing I want to talk about, flat grind. Yes, this is thick behind the edge. Does it cut well? Yeah, actually it does. This is something I've talked about before on my channel. Thickness behind the edge does not automatically mean bad cutting, and thin behind the edge does not automatically mean good cutting, right? There are plenty of knives that are thin behind the edge that don't really cut that great, and there's plenty of knives that are thick behind the edge that cut amazingly well. It depends on how well your grind is done. Is this knife going to like cut tomatoes into thin, like translucent little circles? No, it's not. So if that's what you're looking for, then yeah, obviously this is too big and thick. However, it will cut cardboard and rope and tape and things like that very well because the grind is done well. So there we go. And also the S35VN, we talked about S35VN a little bit before, but I forgot to mention that I think Cold Steel does an excellent job of their S35VN. Like their heat treat on their S35VN is fantastic. Through all of the use I put this knife through all of the, for about a month at work, using it hard in the woods, doing the stupid little testing that I showed in this video, it has maintained an excellent quality of edge. Let's go ahead and pull out one of my sticky notes here. I have not touched up this edge. And it could probably use it. We already showed the damage that it has a little bit. But, gosh. And there we got caught on that little bit of stuff. But, whoops. Not as sharp as it was out of the box, but for all the use I've put it through, that's pretty good. I will probably touch up in fact, I will touch up the edge after this video is done, but yeah, very good for everything it's been through. And speaking of sharpness, yeah, like most Cold Steels, it came out of the box, just waiting to cut you. Very, very sharp. Alrighty. Moving on. The thumb studs are nice. I like these thumb studs. They're kind of exactly the same type of thumb studs that are on the 8015 and the 8010, which works. They're great thumb studs. I like that a lot. You can slow roll the knife. Feels great. You can thumb flick it. Feels great. You can even reverse flick it. But if maybe here, doing this with a camera is a little bit hard, but there we go. Yeah, you can flick it out like that. It has no detent, so technically you can just go like that, but we'll get into that later. Technically, you can even front flip it. This little tallywhacker dongle dangle thing here, yeah, grab that. Ouch. It's not the most comfortable thing, but if you hate yourself, you can do it. No problem. So yeah, good job there. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about what everyone's been wanting to hear about, the lock. So I'm going to throw up some pictures of it taken apart. I took apart this knife a couple of times. And I talked about how I had some looseness, some jiggle when I first had this knife. You can check out my first impressions video. That has gone away. It's absolutely rock solid. And yeah, that's really, really cool. How's the action? Pretty fidgety for such a, Cold Steel is not known for fidgety knives. Like this 8010 is ridiculously smooth, but I would not call it fidgety. Guys, I just about lost my finger there. I would not call it fidgety, but yeah, this knife actually does obtain fidgetability-ness. What do I think about the lock? I like it. What do I think about the lock compared to the shark lock? Well, they are different. Which one is better? I don't think one is better than the other. Whoops. A lot of people are talking about how, you know, the position of the lock release is quite different. This one is up very close, and this one's much further back from the blade. And I was kind of concerned about that too, like maybe that would be an issue. But like day one of having this knife, and I adjusted to it, it's not hard to adjust to that at all. You know, going from this to this is not much different than going from this to this. And so, yeah, I adjusted to it really well. I found it to be super easy to use. And the size of this knife compared to, you know, the size of the 80-20.5 made it easier to manipulate with gloves, but I don't think that's a lock difference. Overall, I like both locks a lot. One thing that I think the Atlas or the Engage has over the 20.5 that I prefer is this is on washers. And just for, you know, just in a dirty use, hard use environment, washers are a little bit better. They keep grit out of the pivot assembly a little bit more. They're a little more durable, a little more stable. But don't get me wrong, I mean, bearings aren't like fragile or anything. I've taken this knife to the woods and out on the ranch and some pretty gnarly places, and it's been all right. But yeah, I just do appreciate the washers. And I mean, you sacrifice a little bit of fidget factor, but I mean, already fidget factor with this much lock strength is already pretty unheard of. Both locks are easy to maintain, in my opinion. They're not terrible to take apart. I definitely prefer taking apart stuff like this to like, I don't know, an Axis lock with the Omega springs and whatnot. But yeah, pretty good. And the other thing too is it allows the knife to be full ambi, and the pocket clip can switch over. So yeah, this is, you know, completely ambidextrous knife. So really, really good. And this video is dragging on. This is gonna be such a long review, but let's go ahead and get into some of the things I don't like. And let's start with that pocket clip. This pocket clip sucks. I hate it. It's terrible. Deep carry clip on a cold steel. I appreciate them trying to do something new, but look at this. Look at the clearance under that bill. That's not enough. That's not enough for any type of work pants. And I don't think anyone's expecting you to carry this knife in basketball shorts. Once the knife is in your pocket, it works okay. Wish the screws are recessed and everything, but you know, there's technically enough of a gap under there. But getting it into your pocket is a nightmare. You literally have to pinch the clip, you know, and lift it up to get in your pocket. I don't like that. And furthermore, the clip is the biggest hotspot on the knife when you're using it with bare hands. How can I show this? Break my wrist. The knife is the biggest hotspot when you're using the clip is the biggest hotspot when you're using the knife with bare hands. If you have gloves, you know, gloves kind of mitigate hotspots, but yeah, in bare hands, it's definitely an issue. The pocket clip is without a doubt my least favorite part of the knife. Without a doubt. Okay, next up. I really wish Cold Steel would like do stone washes on these types of knives, and that's kind of weird because Cold Steel does really good satin finishes, actually. This one's all fingerprinted and mucked up. I think this knife is a little bit more clean right now. Let's see. Yeah, Cold Steel really does do great satin finishes. So I really feel bad about complaining about them, but these are hard use knives. I just prefer a stone wash. You know, I've used my 8015s a lot, and is it on this one or one of my other ones? But yeah, you can see like all the little scratches and dings and stuff in the blade. That stuff just happens with use. You know, you scratch up your knife. Stone washes hide that a little bit better, and so for a hard use knife, I definitely think a stone wash fits. And especially since Cold Steel can do amazing stone washes too. I don't have my Formax Scout with me right now, but it has one of the most amazing stone washes ever on it. Fantastic, 10 out of 10 stone wash. Hides wear beautifully. I like that. So there's that. Next thing, I wish they'd use like T8s back here. They use a T10 pivot, but come on, Cold Steel, give us bigger hardware. Come on. And then next for complaints are going to be things that, look, if you are not a Cold Steel person, I don't know why you watched this far into the video, but you know, you have to have a certain mindset or job requirement to like Cold Steel knives. Either you just love overbuilt knives or you need overbuilt knives. If you neither love them nor need them, you're probably never going to buy this knife. But it's heavy, it's big, it's aggressive, it's not really, you know, it's more fidgety than some Cold Steels, but it's not like, you know, it doesn't give you like all the fancy, you know, it's not elegant and, you know, classy, I guess. So those are going to be negatives for some people. One thing I will point out is the height. This is something that even I noticed, is that this knife is really tall for, you know, what you're getting. Like the blade is not that tall, but when everything's folded up, it's a pretty tall knife. I remember handing this to my dad. I was showing my dad this knife, and you know, we're visiting, and I handed this one to him. He said, "Oh, that's not as heavy as I thought it would be." I said, "No." He said, "Oh, it's kind of thin." I said, "Yeah." He says, "I'd never carry this though because it's too fat." And he does have a point, and a lot of people are going to think that way. Next thing, yeah, even though the blade play worked itself out on mine, I mean, I can get just a little bit. I wasn't a big fan of that. However, a lot of people told me that theirs were not like that. And also, like with my shark lock knives, not this one, but after extended use, this knife picked up a little bit of a rattle or like just tiny bit of flex. And Andrew Demko, the designer of the shark lock, says that's completely normal. So I'd assume the same is true for this. But yeah, also I'm not a big fan of this lanyard hole, but you know, whatever. Lanyard people gonna lanyard. So yeah, my biggest complaint with this knife 100% is the clip. I can't stand the clip at all. Okay, let's go ahead and get to my final conclusions finally. Okay, so what are my thoughts on the Cold Steel Engage? Well, got a lot of them, as you can tell from the length of this video. You'll notice there wasn't a whole lot in the negative category, and that's because a lot of things that I think, you know, you could say negatively about this knife, the weight, the size, it's too big, it's overbuilt, blah, blah, blah. Those are all the reasons I bought the knife. So they're kind of positives for me. And I think for most people wanting to buy this knife, there'll be positives for them too. So I don't really think they apply here. As a user, this knife was good. You know, out in the woods, I didn't have a problem with it. And something, you know, people might ask is, why do you need an overbuilt folder? Because I've been pretty open about the fact that at work, I've been pretty open about the fact, wow, I sound like, gee, that was a weird way to say that. But anyways, at work, I also carry a fixed blade, you know? So I carry a fixed blade, I carry a overbuilt folder, and then I also carry, you know, usually some type of smaller, thinner knife. I carried the Speedy Conspirator a couple times, but most of the time it was my Kaiser Begleiter, which I don't have around right now. Oh, measuring bug out sometimes. So why do I carry these different knives? Well, the fixed blade is as a survival knife because, again, I'm out in the woods. Sometimes, you know, something might go wrong, and it has gone wrong in the past. But I also do use this for a lot of my bigger tasks. The other thing, too, though, is I appreciate having an overbuilt folder because, you know, sometimes I just don't have my fixed blade around. You know, I usually carry it with me on my belt, but there's certain days, for example, there's this one hill where if I'm building fence or fixing fence up that hill, I'm carrying the chainsaw, I'm carrying my other tools, all this stuff, you know, my hammer, my tool bag, my pliers, extra wire, all this stuff. I don't really want to have a knife dangling off my belt with my tool bag full of other stuff. So it's good to have a very strong, capable knife that's in a folding package that can go in my pocket. So yeah, I appreciate that. But regardless, you know, really, there's just certain tasks that you do need overbuilt knives for. And I'm not going to go into the whole, you know, a whole use your shit type of rant, because I'm not like that. But there's definitely a place for knives like this. So if you're someone who's going to say, well, you know, you never need a knife like that type of knife, that much power, that much overbuiltness, I would argue that, yeah, there's totally some things that you need it for. How does this knife stack up to other cold steels I've handled? The one-handed usability of it, I found to be really, really cool. That is something that oftentimes with cold steels you don't get. And so what oh, excuse me. What I normally do, let's say I'm using my 8010, I'm out in the woods, I'm doing some bushcraft task or something, and this hand is busy, I'm making my cut, finish the cut, I need this hand to do something, I'll usually just set the knife aside, stick it in a piece of wood, toss it on the ground, whatever, set that aside, get my hand back to what I'm doing. It is really cool to have a cold steel that's overbuilt and, you know, ready for anything that you can manipulate with one hand. Except right there. Oh, that's another negative I'll talk about. I forgot because I've mentioned it so much. Yeah, this knife, I wish it had a little more of a, you know, something keeping it in there. But, you know, that's whatever. But yeah, having that one-handed use ability. Oh, and another thing, I wish I had jimping up here. Jeez, I'm looking at my notes right now. I'm like, wait, I didn't talk about a lot of my dislikes. Some of my dislikes. I do wish I had jimping here. Some people don't like jimping. I really like jimping. I don't want jimping like this necessarily. I wish it had like Spyderco type jimping back here. Yeah, that's something I wish it had. But yeah, the one-handed usability was really nice. How does it stack up to other cold steels? I would not say it's my favorite. I still prefer, like, this is still my favorite cold steel, followed by this one. And then, let's go ahead and close that up. And I would say I even prefer things like the Recon 1 or well, not the Recon 1, I meant to say the 4 Max over this. But I would put this in kind of the same category as the Recon 1, as a Code 4. It's a great knife. It really is. I expect it to be kind of put up some competition to the 8010. I don't really think it did. If you have an 8010 and you're perfectly happy with it, this, I wouldn't say this is an upgrade. Now, if you need a hard use knife and you, like, maybe this is the first one you're buying, yeah, this is a great knife. If you're a cold steel collector, this is obviously a must-have. For me, I did enjoy using it. I did enjoy testing it, but I don't know if I'm going to use it more or less than the cold steels I already have. So, yeah, it's got a little bit thinner blade stock than this knife, but, I've used my Recon 1 clip point for, tough but slicey jobs all the time. So, do I like the knife? Yes. Can I recommend it? Yes, absolutely. Do I think it's the best thing cold steel's ever made? No. I wish there was jimping here, and the pocket clip really, really needs to be changed. Cold steel has never been known for great clips, but this one is one of their worst. But yeah, there's my thoughts. Long video. I apologize, guys, but if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I've been Gideon, and I'll see you in the next one. Adios.